Chapter 12, the cardiovascular system, blood. Topics, blood functions and components overview. Here's what the blood looks under a slide. Lots of different cells. You can tell that the red ones are the most common of the cells. The blood is, of course, the very important tissue for the cardiovascular system because the function of the cardiovascular system is to transport blood throughout the body, and the blood carrying many important things for the body, such as oxygen, nutrients, carbon dioxide, waste, and so on. Functions of the blood include transportation. As mentioned already, it carries oxygen to the cells, it carries carbon dioxide away from the cells, it carries nutrients to the cells and wastes away from the cells. It carries heat, that's right, it moves heat around the body, and it also moves things like hormones and electrolytes and, well, a lot of other materials that are found in the blood. Blood's also involved in regulation, specifically helping to maintain homeostasis in all of the bodily fluids. Basically, all fluids of the body come from the blood, so whatever the composition of the blood is, it affects the composition of the other fluids in the body. And then, of course, protection. Two forms of protection. One is the protection from excessive loss of blood. So this occurs primarily through the formation of blood clots, and also protection from pathogens via the immune response. So in the typical human, 92% of that human is the various fluids and tissues of the body, and 8% is the whole blood. So 8% of your body by weight is blood. Blood can be broken down then into the liquid portion, the blood plasma, which is approximately 55% of whole blood, and the solids, the formed elements, which is approximately 45% of whole blood. When you look at blood plasma, you see that primarily it's water. Over 90% of blood plasma is water, but it also has proteins and other things dissolved in the blood plasma. So when we look at the other solutes, the other things dissolved in the blood plasma, we see that it's only 1.5% of the blood plasma. So that is a pretty tiny amount. And this is all the electrolytes, the nutrients, the gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, waste products, and so on. The things we think of as being the most important materials carried in blood. And the reason for this is because, of course, the blood's constantly delivering these materials to wherever they need to be. So overall, there's not a lot of them in the blood at any given time. Then, of course, we have the proteins. These are the plasma proteins, because they're found in the blood plasma. The three main kinds include albumin. Albumin is important because it contributes to the overall osmotic pressure of the blood. So basically, because it's present in the blood plasma, it helps make it so that water wants to enter blood vessels. So it makes there lower concentration of water in the blood than in other tissues, so water wants to enter the blood vessels. And then albumin also affects blood viscosity, how thick the blood is, and therefore how easy it is to move the blood through the blood vessels. Second category of plasma proteins is the globulins. The globulins are two different main functions. There are globulins involved in the immune response. We know them as antibodies. They could also be called immunoglobulins, and they help to target and destroy pathogens. And there are globulins that help to transport nutrients in the bloodstream, specifically lipids, aka fats, because fats and lipids are hydrophobic, so they do not want to be in the watery environment of the blood plasma, so the globulins make it possible for them to be transported by the blood. And then the third category is fibrinogen. Fibrinogen is a key protein for blood clotting. Well, specifically, fibrinogen gets turned into a protein that's key for blood clotting. Obviously, we don't want it clotting until it's needed. All right, then we have the formed elements. The formed elements make up approximately 45% of the volume of whole blood, and they are the cells and cell-like structures. So some of them are official cells with nucleuses and so forth, and others are considered cell-like structures because they're lacking many of the organelles needed in a living cell. And they can be broken down into the platelets, the white blood cells, and the red blood cells. 98.9%. So almost all of the formed elements are the red blood cells, also known as erythrocytes. Then we have the white blood cells make up 0.1%. So these important cells for our immune response are really a tiny number of the cells found in the bloodstream. White blood cells are also known as leukocytes. And then about 1% of the formed elements are platelets, also known as thrombocytes. Platelets and red blood cells are cell-like structures. They're technically not cells because they do not have a nucleus and they miss a lot of the other important organelles. The white blood cells, the leukocytes, are true cells. If you look at the various kinds of leukocytes, you see that all of them have nucleuses. They are possessing all the organelles you expect for a living cell. And leukocytes can be broken down further into neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils. Finally, another important point, the term hematocrit, you may have run into looking at blood tests from, say, a physical. Hematocrit is the percentage volume of the red blood cells in blood. So how much of the overall volume of the blood is red blood cells. And that varies a little bit based on gender and other issues, but on average it's 42% in females and 47% in males. So 42 to 40% of your blood by volume should be red blood cells. Hemopoiesis is the production of blood cells, and all blood cells are produced in the red bone marrow, which we know is found in the skeletal system, found in the bones. While some of the blood cells do differentiate elsewhere in the body, all of them are initially produced in the red bone marrow. So it all starts with the pluripotent stem cell found in the red bone marrow. This starts off the process of hemopoiesis. It will divide. One of them will become another pluripotent stem cell, and the other will go down one of these various branches to become a specific kind of cell. You don't need to memorize this chart. It just shows that the pluripotent stem cell can either go down one route to become most of the different kinds of cells, red blood cells, platelets, some of the leukocytes, eosinophils, basophils, neutrophils, and monocytes. Or it can go down another route as a lymphoid stem cell and become either T lymphocyte, B lymphocyte, or natural killer cell. And as you can see, some of these cells further differentiate depending on where they go in the body and what happens to them. So again, you do not need to memorize this chart. Just know that the pluripotent stem cells in the red bone marrow can lead to either one of two possible routes that will lead eventually to the different kinds of blood cells, erythrocytes, thrombocytes, the various leukocytes, including the lymphocytes, which have their own special way to be produced. And that is it for this part of Chapter 12.